the flickering glow of a cinema screen, in the swelling, hypnotic strings of a waltz, designed to manipulate your heartbeat. On the surface, we see a golden ballroom and a swirling yellow gown. Underneath the ink and paint, we are looking at a prison cell decorated in velvet. This is not a fairy tale about redemption. It is a masterclass in Stockholm Syndrome, masked by melody. We were told a love story, a gentle princess who learned to see past appearances, who discovered beauty within ugliness through patience and a tender kiss. In Disney painted us watercolors of transformation through kindness, of feminine grace rewarded with princely devotion. The sanitized fairy tale celebrates yielding, teaches children that compliance brings happiness, that saying yes to unwanted advances leads to magical romance. The archives reveal something else entirely. In the original 1812 Grimm text, there is no kiss. There is no gentle acceptance. Instead, there is the wet slap of amphibian flesh against cold stone, the sharp crack of a frog's body meeting the bedroom wall with all the force a desperate young woman can summon. The princess does not embrace her tormentor. She hurls him away from her with such violence that his bones should shatter. This is not cruelty. This is exorcism. This is a woman weaponizing her own fury to break free from a binding curse that exploited both supernatural law and patriarchal authority to trap her in servitude. The story unfolds not in a world of romantic possibility, but in the suffocating hierarchy of medieval German courts, where daughters existed as political instruments and paternal commands carried the weight of divine law. Here, in the shadows between the 17th and 19th centuries, marriage functioned as a project of power, meticulously orchestrated by fathers who viewed their daughters' bodies as negotiable territory. The air itself was thick with constraint. In castle chambers lit by flickering candles, the smell of tallow mixed with the metallic tang of iron and rust, the organic decay of centuries settling into stone walls that had witnessed generations of women disappearing into arranged unions. The very architecture breathed oppression. Narrow corridors, heavy doors, windows set high and small, designed to contain rather than liberate. The princess inhabited a world where the king's anger was law, where his voice could cut through any protest with absolute authority. When she recoiled from the frog's advances, when disgust made her heart beat violently against her ribs, her father did not offer comfort. Instead, he became angry. His words carried the weight of moral imperative disguised as virtue. Those who help you in need must not be scorned. This was not kindness, but coercion, wrapped in righteousness. The forest, well, where her golden ball disappeared, stretched down into darkness, so complete that no bottom could be seen. The water had not touched sunlight for decades, carrying the sulphurous reek of stagnation, the accumulated rot of leaves, aimed small creatures that had fallen and never emerged. When the frog surfaced from those depths, it brought with it the smell of that other world, the damp musk of something that belonged neither to earth nor water, but to the spaces between. In her bedroom, sanctuary violated, the princess felt the cold wetness of amphibian skin against her fingertips as she held the creature at maximum distance. The contrast was unbearable. Her warm silk bedding, the comfort of her private space, invaded by this slimy embodiment of unwanted obligation. Each night, the frog climbed the marble stairs with mechanical inevitability, each step echoing through corridors that offered no escape. The curse progressed with calculated intimacy, first sharing her golden plate, every bite sticking in her throat as revulsion battled with enforced compliance. Then her cup, the rim still wet from amphibian lips. Finally, her bed, the ultimate violation of private space. The frog's demands escalated systematically, crossing each boundary with the confidence of one who knew patriarchal law would enforce his claims. By the second night, Something had crystallized in the princess's chest, not acceptance, but its opposite. A fury so intense, it burned away fear, so complete it transformed her trembling hands into instruments of refusal. When she gathered her strength and hurled the frog against the stone wall, the sound that followed was not the gentle chime of Disney magic, but the sharp percussion of constraint breaking, of iron bands shattering with violent force. This was the sound of a woman reclaiming her autonomy, through the only language the curse understood: absolute, uncompromising violence. The true horror of this tale lies not in magic, but in the systematic machinery of control that operates with surgical precision. The frog is not a victim of enchantment. He is a predator who has weaponized obligation itself. Observe his methodology. He does not court the princess. He does not woo her. He extracts compliance through escalating demands, each more invasive than the last. First, companionship at her table, a violation of social boundaries disguised as reasonable request. Second, sharing her plate and cup, intimate contact, the mingling of saliva, the forced ingestion of his presence. Third, access to her bed, the final territorial conquest of her most private space. This is not romance. This is the textbook pattern of coercive control documented in modern psychology: boundary erosion through incremental violation. Each demand is framed as the logical extension of the previous concession. Each refusal is met with the same weapon: her broken promise, transformed into a legal cudgel. The curse itself operates as what psychologists term transactional control. The frog leverages her moment of desperation, her need for the golden ball, not as the foundation for mutual obligation, but as permanent psychological imprisonment. He does not seek her love. He seeks her submission. The promise becomes a contract written in her blood, enforceable by supernatural law. But the frog could not operate without his enabler. The father. Here stands the most chilling figure in the tale: the patriarch, who forces his daughter to submit to violation in the name of honor. When she recoils from the frog's touch, when every instinct screams danger, when her body rebels against forced intimacy, the father intervenes, not to protect her, to deliver her. A promise must be kept, he declares. And with those words, he transforms from protector into procurer. He does not ask what the frog demanded of her. He does not investigate the nature of this obligation. He simply commands obedience to an external male authority, regardless of the cost to his daughter's body or soul. The absent witch, who cast the original curse, represents the shadow maternal figure, the woman who creates dependency, enforces submission through supernatural coercion, establishes the template for emotional imprisonment. She operates, through proxy, using the frog as her instrument of control, teaching the princess that female resistance will be met with escalating punishment. This triumvirate, frog, father, witch, forms an interlocking system of patriarchal control that leaves the princess with no legitimate avenue of escape. Every authority figure demands her compliance. Every refusal is reframed as moral failing. Every instinct for self-preservation is pathologized as selfishness. The frog's sophistication lies in his understanding of this system. He does not need to overpower her physically. He simply activates the machinery of obligation that already surrounds her, turning her own father into his enforcer, her own conscience into his weapon. But what if we strip away the supernatural veneer entirely? What if the curse was not magic at all, but medical reality, wrapped in folkloric language? In the Germanic regions where this tale emerged, syphilis ravaged populations with particular savagery. The disease began with pustules and eruptions, progressing through stages of disfigurement that rendered victims literally untouchable. A cursed prince, reduced to a Garsteiger Frosch, a disgusting slimy creature, echoes precisely the folklore surrounding syphilis sufferers. Consider the vectors of transmission. The frog demands, sharing her plate, her cup, her bed. These are not romantic gestures. They are the precise pathways through which disease spreads. The frog's insistence on intimate contact takes on sinister clinical significance when viewed through the lens of contagion. Medieval and early modern medical understanding linked syphilis to moral corruption, divine punishment, and supernatural curse. The disease was literally called the French disease, the Italian disease, the Spanish disease, always attributed to foreign contamination, always framed as invasion by the other. A foreign prince, cursed with disfiguring illness, demanding intimate access to a healthy princess, becomes a perfect metaphor for the terror of sexual contagion. The frog's slimy skin, his repulsive appearance, his demand for physical contact, despite obvious disease markers, all align with contemporary descriptions of advanced syphilis. The pustules, the weeping sores, the gradual transformation from human to something monstrous. Medical texts from the period describe syphilis sufferers as literally frog-like in their appearance, swollen, discolored, covered in erupting lesions. The father's insistence that she honor her promise takes on darker implications when viewed as arranged marriage politics. Perhaps this frog represents a foreign alliance, a political necessity that requires the princess to sacrifice her body for diplomatic gain. Her father's willingness to deliver her to obvious disease suggests the cold calculation of dynastic marriage, where female bodies serve as currency in male political transactions. The violent transformation, her desperate act of hurling the frog against the wall, becomes a moment of medical clarity. She recognizes the threat to her own survival and acts with primal desperation to expel the contagion. Her rage becomes the only available medicine against a system that demands she accept the unacceptable. The breaking of the curse represents not magical transformation, but the moment when she refuses assimilation into sickness. She will not be civilized into accepting contamination. She will not be convinced that her revulsion is prejudice. Her body's wisdom overcomes social obligation. In this reading, the princess's violence is not cruelty. It is the immune system of a healthy organism, rejecting invasion. Her father's horror at her action reflects not moral outrage, but the fury of a man whose political arrangement has been destroyed by his daughter's inconvenient will to live. The handsome prince who emerges represents not magical reward, but the fantasy compensation that patriarchal narrative provides when women comply with its demands. The tale promises that submission to the diseased, the repulsive, the threatening will somehow transform into beauty and love. But the clinical evidence suggests otherwise. The princess's moment of violence, her refusal to accept the unacceptable, may be the only honest moment in the entire tale. The final timeline unfolds with the precision of a blade. Day 1. Morning. The golden ball falls into the well's darkness, not lost or but surrendered to forces beyond her control. By noon, the bargain is struck in desperation. The princess believes water will contain him, that the natural order will protect her. She does not yet understand that in fairy tales, the natural order serves power, not innocence. Day 2 arrives like a debt collector. Evening descends on the castle as the frog appears at the door, invoking sacred words before the king. The father does not protect, he enforces. You promised, therefore you shall obey. Authority reveals its true face, not protection of the vulnerable, but preservation of the system that creates vulnerability. She carries him to her chamber, each step a capitulation. She places him in the corner, maintaining distance, denying his escalating demands. But corners offer no sanctuary. When the entire room has become a cage, the frog presses forward with the confidence of one who knows the law is on his side. He threatens to tell her father, the ultimate weapon in a world where women exist at the intersection of male authority and male desire. Then comes the demand for her bed, her most intimate space, the final boundary. Something breaks. not her spirit, her compliance. The text records it with Germanic precision. Sie war bitter böse. She became bitterly angry. This is not hysteria. This is recognition. The moment when a human being realizes that the choice is not between good and evil, but between submission and refusal. She seizes him with 2 fingers. Even in rage, she cannot bear full contact with her violation. She hurls him with all her strength against the wall. The impact is immediate, decisive, transformative. Not because violence is redemptive, but because refusal is. The curse breaks not through acceptance, but through rejection. The prince emerges, grateful not for her compliance, but for her resistance. Heinrich's iron bands shatter, the protective magic no longer needed, because the supernatural bond has been severed by an act of will. We sanitize this story because we could not bear its truth, that sometimes liberation requires violence against forces that would possess us. We invented the kiss because we needed to believe in gentle solutions to brutal problems. We transformed the princess's agency into passivity because a world where women seize their own redemption threatens every system built on their compliance. The Frog Prince endures not as a love story, but as an instruction manual for refusal. It teaches what our civilization desperately needs to remember, that obligation without consent is coercion, that authority without protection is tyranny, and that sometimes the only transformation possible is the one you create, through your own decisive action, against impossible circumstances. This is why we tell ourselves fairy tales, not to comfort but to remember what we are capable of when cornered. The darkness in these stories is not the monster at the door, but the recognition that the door was never locked. We always had the power to refuse. We simply forgot we were allowed to use it.